Hey everybody, good morning. Mestre Sukuri coming to you from Tokyo, Japan, here on Mestre Vibes. Today I'm going to talk about where the word origin of the word capoeira comes from. We got a request on Mestre Vibes on the last video I posted, especially on the review of Mestre Nestor Capoeira's book. They'd asked me to do an explanation of why his name is Mestre Nestor Capoeira and why we have, where does the word capoeira come from? Okay, remember, guys, if you like this channel, please subscribe. We're at 198. It'd be great to get 2 more people from this video. 200 is still a long way from where we want to be, but it'll help a lot. So subscribe, like, share, and hit the notifications button. Okay? Okay. Mestre Nestor Capoeira, the word, when it's given to a person's name, is because in Brazil there's a rich tradition, like in many other places of the world, but in Brazil, I felt that from what I've seen, it's even more, is a rich tradition of nickname giving, right? For example, if a person is doing painting, somebody might be going, oh, pintor, so the nickname becomes painter. If the person works with reptiles, they might call them jacaré or they might call them cobra, something, because nicknaming is something very common in Brazil. There's a long history of it in capoeira. And a lot of times I've seen the parallels between African American culture and Afro-Brazilian culture in this sense, just to give an example. So, for example, a person who is a street criminal in the United States or a person conducting illicit affairs or whatever will be given a nickname. Why? Because if the police come and arrest somebody who knows you, they won't be able to give the actual name. They don't know the actual name, right? Like for me, Sukuri, if I do something bad, go, what's Sukuri's real name? How do we find him? Nobody knows. They only know me by Sukuri. So it's a layer of protection for people who are of criminal or illegal means. Now, in America, United States, and in Brazil, it's similar, right? People for a while, capoeira and other Afro-Brazilian practices were illegal, yeah? Not just capoeira, all Afro-Brazilian, not all, but most Afro-Brazilian forms of expression that were recognized by the government were outlawed because it brought people together, and that creates, a place for people to communicate, exchange ideas, and possibly lead to rebellion and different things. So uprising. So they wanted to control that. So it was disbanded. They didn't want people together. Okay. Now, Mestre Nestor Capoeira, for example, I'm sometimes referred to as Mestre Sukuri Capoeira. There it is. It's just because people associate you with the art. So I believe his real name is Nestor, like Mestre Pastinha. His real name was Pastinha. So people just add the capoeira because they're associating you with the art, right? They might call you Mestre, like say you're a really good person at fishing. Oh, I don't know. Nestor Pescador, right? That's the first name, or Stephen Pescador, or John Pescador, or Susan Pescadora. Fisherman is added just because it's part of how people perceive you and your occupation or what you're involved with. Okay, now, where does the word capoeira come from? I'm not going to talk about this in an oral tradition. I'm going to talk about this in an academic tradition. Why? Because I want to discuss the etymology of the word capoeira. I know a lot of people talk about it, but I think that in the capoeira community, I have a rare perspective because I have been studying Afro-Brazilian and Afro-Latino culture as a career for 20 years. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 books or a couple of opinions. I'm talking about hundreds, possibly thousands of hours of reading and research on the topic. Okay? And anyone who wants to talk about that, we can talk about that in a more academic video. I don't want to talk about too academically here, but just basic information on how the word comes about. Okay, one idea that the word capoeira comes from Amerindian language of Tupi-Guarani, which is capoeira can be like kind of like the high grass where the slaves escaped to, or where the Indians escaped to, the native Brazilians escaped to. Okay, another one is capô, or capau, which means rooster, and it refers to like maybe when the slaves would take their roosters to market or their goods to market to sell on Sundays, then they would have leisure time, and then they would play capoeira. Now, both of these, have different value. Some say that capoeira was created in the free slave states of Quilombo dos Palmares, or in the free slave cities when slaves would escape and then set up their own independent communities. Okay, personally, I really don't know. I, as a academic and an educator, I haven't seen anything that says this is where the word comes from. The earliest uses are, of course, the 1600s, when foreign explorers came and wrote about Brazil, and they used the word capoeira. So we really don't know where the word origin comes from. And although it would be incredible to be able to go back in time and find out, I think it's pretty much a dead point to study, right? Because so many people I have and so many other academics have looked for where the word comes from, and there's really no consensus on where it comes from, at least not that I have seen. One thing I would say is that it is an Afro-Brazilian manifestation, and we have to think a lot about how what most people seem to think that I run into, especially Brazilian, because of the Brazilian educational system and the lack thereof Afro-Brazilian and actually Afro-slavery education. A lot of times people think slavery was very a microcosm, right? It was very local. Like slavery was like this here, slavery was like this here, and slavery was like this here. When actually slavery was an international and a very lucrative industry, right? So a lot of times, like if a slave was too much trouble here, they would sell him somewhere else, or just like commodities. It's horrible, but that's what would happen, right? So for example, you have slaves actually being moved all over, not to mention the free slaves who moved a lot. We get who are granted manumission. Manumission mean when you're granted freedom as a slave. Okay, you work for your master for a long time, and then finally they say, okay, you're free. They give you your papers, and you're a free slave, a free citizen now, right? So we have to take all these things into account, plus all the non-slaves that were, let's say, merchants or merchants' assistants traveling on the boats and working in the maritime industry. So if you look at Latin America, you're actually going to see that there was a lot of movement of the human commodity known as slaves, right? So they're going to be moving all over, coming back. So this also leads to a lot of interesting cultural evolutions. For example, in some places you have things that are more similar in Cuba to things in Bahia than Bahia next door to each other, mostly because of the slave cycles, which types of slaves were put in at the time, and which types of Africans were brought, and what cultural significance they put in. So we see a lot of, let's say, salt, pepper, garlic, a lot of different spices in Africa that have possibly contributed to capoeira. But in my opinion, the word capoeira is too difficult to explain. There's no way to actually find out what it meant or where it comes from, right? But capoeira for me is through all research an Afro-Brazilian art. So I hope that helps. I'm trying to do my best here, and it's a nice, hot and humid Tuesday morning and start of the week. So if you guys like this channel, remember to subscribe, support us with as much you can. If you like the t-shirts we wear, check out our Teespring account. I'll put the links below. Subscribe to Mestre Vibes. A lot of peace, a lot of love, and a lot of ashe.